In this video, I shall discuss a poem titled His Name is Today, written by a Chilean poet and a Nobel laureate. Her name is Gabriela Mistral. Gabriela Mistral is the pseudonym of Lucila Godoy Alcayaga, a well-known Chilean poet and writer. So before we look into the poem, it is very important as students of literature that we are aware of socio-political scenario of Latin American countries so that we can have better understanding of this poem. When I say Latin American countries, I am specifically speaking about the countries in South American continent which were earlier colonized by Spanish people. So what was the history of these Latin American countries? The post-colonial era in Latin American countries, they gradually shifted towards the era of neo-colonialism because earlier seeds of capitalism were sown in this part of the world by great American capitalists. Certain part of this Latin American continent is known as Banana Republic, where United Fruit Company was started by American capitalists and huge profit was made at the cost of Latin American land, people, their culture and nature. So most of the Latin American writers, they question this aspect of capitalism and how the people of Latin America were again exploited in a neo-colonial period. So now I'll come to Gabriela Mistral, who is a contemporary of some important other Chilean writers such as Pablo Neruda and Isabella Allende. So when we read her poems, one should also know certain autobiographical details about Gabriela Mistral. Gabriela Mistral, she was a teacher by profession, and later she became one of the most influential political diplomat in Chilean diplomacy. So when she was a diplomat, her focus was towards two important things. The first one was towards the child health care, and the second one was towards education system. So these two were given more importance by Gabriela Mistral because when a country has a very strong medical facility and a well established education system, it can face any kind of global problem. The other important aspect which I want to discuss before we look into the poem, what was the cultural scenario of Latin American countries when writers like Gabriela Mistral started writing their poetry? It was a period when the works of women writers was not acknowledged by the male-dominated phallocentric machismo tradition of writing literature. So when I say phallocentric tradition of writing literature, I am specifically mentioning about how the privilege of producing art or literature was given only for men and women were seen inferior. And it is in this context you should understand the poems written by Gabriela Mistral. So let's try to understand the poem and what Gabriela Mistral is trying to suggest through this poem. So you have a poem. The title of the poem is His Name is Today. Let me read out the poem first, then we shall try to understand it line by line. We are guilty of many errors and many faults, but our worst crime is abandoning the children, neglecting the fountain of life. Many of the things we need can wait. The child cannot. Right now is the time. His bones are being formed, his blood is being made, and his senses are being developed. To him, we cannot answer tomorrow. His name is today. So the poem is addressed in first person. The narrator, she is very much confessional in the first lines of the poem. And she says, we as a mankind, we as a world, we are guilty We are guilty of many errors and many faults. She says that we have committed so many mistakes. We are guilty of many errors. We are guilty of many faults. You can go on naming them. It could be war, it could be destruction of nature, it could be so many things in the name of religion, in the name of race. We have killed one another. So there are so many errors and so many faults we have done. But in the next line, she says, our worst crime, look at the word crime here. When you compare this word crime with the words errors and faults in the first line, you should understand the intensity with which she carries forward the poem. She says, our worst crime is abandoning the children. This is a very important line. She says, it is a crime. You should try to understand the word crime here, because crime is not a error or a fault. Because error or a fault can be forgivable, but crime is something unforgivable and a kind of punishable act. So, according to the poet, our worst crime, the crime committed by the entire mankind in this world, that we have abandoned the children. That is our negligence towards the young lot, the children in our society, because we have neglected the fountain of life. So she uses the term fountain of life to refer to children. So children here are termed as fountain of life. As you can understand the meaning of this term, fountain refers to a original source of something. So here children, they are source of life. It is from children we can think of future. But our worst crime is that we have abandoned our children. Our focus was only towards war. Our focus was only towards occupying territories. Our focus was only towards this global domination, which was a result of colonialism. But the worst thing we have done, that we have neglected, we have abandoned our children. That is, we have neglected the fountain of life. So we have committed a very serious crime. So what we have to do, she says, many of the things we need can wait. There are so many things we need in our lives. So this entire world is in need of so many things. But all other things can wait. You can take some time to look into those aspects. But the most important thing, that the child cannot wait. All other things can wait, but the child cannot wait. We should look into this aspect of giving importance to the health care of children and towards the education of children, and how we can make sure that a healthy child, when we say a healthy child, both physically and mentally, grows in a healthy society. So many of the things we need can wait, but the child cannot. So what is the immediate action we have to take? Right now, the present, this is the time when his bones, look here, in the first part of the poem, you have a plural children, but in the next part of the poem, in the second paragraph, so it becomes a singular. So, and that too, she says, right now is the time his bones are being formed. So his refers to a child. So this is the time where child is growing up. So she is referring to the physical growth of child, the bodily growth of that child. Right now is the time his bones are being formed, and his blood is being made, and his senses are being developed. When she says his senses are being developed, she is not just referring to the physical growth of the child, as mentioned in the first, that is in the earlier part. She is also referring to the mental growth of the child. His senses are being developed. This is the time when both physical and mental growth of the child is happening. So here I want to pause for a moment, because one can also look into multiple meanings which she is trying to suggest in these words. The poem need not be interpreted only as a poem looking into the matter of how to upbring a child, how one should give importance to the physical and mental growth of a child. Here, Gabriela Mistral is also suggesting about the birth of Chile after the colonial period. So here, the child is none other than the Chile, which has come out of the cruel history of colonialism, and now it is coming out of all those shackles and trying to create its own identity in the world. So, in this way, also one can try to understand this poem. His name is Today. So, going back to the earlier theme of looking into this poem as dealing with the issue of child healthcare and education, let's continue reading the poem. She says, right now is the time his bones are being formed, his blood is being made, which means the child's physical growth is happening and his senses are being developed, which means his mental growth is happening. So we must make sure that whatever steps we must take today because to him, to that child, we cannot answer tomorrow. Tomorrow, if the same child questions us back, what you have done for us, to the children, to the youth, we will not be having any answer. So, whatever we can do, we have to do it today because his name, the child's name, is none other than today. So, the poet says the immediate action one should take is to look into the issue of how we can make sure that a healthy child grows in a society without any hindrances, without any interactions. So, when I conclude this poem, I should also give a reference of Pablo Neruda's poem To the Foot from Its Child, where he also tells about the same issue of how an individuality and freedom of a child is curbed in a conservative society. So you can see a similar theme being operated in most of the poems by Latin American writers. So this poem is very significant. It is universal and it is relevant even today because even today we are not able to address the issue of child health care and education to its full terms. So in this way one can analyze the poem His Name is Today. I hope you understood my explanation. Please like, share and subscribe my YouTube channel. Thank you.